It was kind of in that same thing, like what are the challenges that you see now that you've have worked with schools and processes? What are the obstacles? Like when you go through this process, do you see any obstacles that our leaders should think about, or a stakeholder who's a part of this, or that you see that causes, I won't say derailment, but a little kind of like off the track and then coming back in. So I just thought, for the people who are going to hopefully read your book, and we want to kind of give a little, at the end, we're going to give a little, a little more details about where you could get this information. But what would be something that for you for us to think about, like, hey, as we go through these processes, and from your experience of working with so many school districts and just different educators, some of the challenges that you might see as they go through this?
Yeah, and I think this is one where like we have to start by naming race and how it shows up differently, right? So when I talk to other white male educators, too often white male mentality can get in the way, right? Where it's, you have folks that the savior complex comes out, the I can fix this, or, my way of thinking is the right way. All those sorts of biases, things that surface in certain ways become a real obstacle for folks, right? Especially if you are a white leader working in a predominantly non-white community, navigating that space, really being able to listen with empathy, building trust. When people have right reasons not to trust somebody that they don't know, and have a history of experiences in that way. At the same time, like we talk to particularly female leaders of color, who some of their barriers are more around like having to do work that would not be expected of anybody else, where other leaders in the region are able to say like, hey, this is the plan. These women with doctorates, with advanced degrees, with multiple experience doing this are told by their boards they've got to bring research. They need to explain why it's happening, right? They need to go through these other hoops. They're expected to do this piece, and that additional scrutiny makes it a lot harder to maintain the role, because it's that constant barrier, critique, frustration, inability to get what you want to have happen, because of other places like that. So I think those are two big ones. I think another one is I have not yet met a leader that doesn't struggle with the trust and transparency and getting it right. I think the default for most leaders is to not trust others enough, to trust their own judgment more in those beginning situations, and not take the risk to say, you know what, it's okay if I trust them to do it. If it blows up, here's how I'll fix it, or here will be my criteria for stepping in, the evidence that I need to see. And then not being transparent enough, not being vulnerable about where you're learning, where you're making mistakes, what are the things that you're worried about with the work. And then, of course, there's a subset of people who overshare and are telling you too much about what's going on, and people worry about their competence and their emotional health. So I think living in that world of trust and transparency and the sweet spot matters. Mm-hmm. Being comfortable giving feedback in a way that cares and really honors that you love the person. And then really wrestling with the way that your race, your gender, your other identities show up in your leadership in that community.